Lesson 4. We'll be in chapter 4, in fact. Statutes and Ordinances. I said last week we'd be talking about the law, and we're getting into the law now and what he laid down for them to do. And so that's what we're going to start on tonight. So, Deuteronomy 4:1. Now, Israel, listen to the statutes and ordinances I am teaching you to follow, so that you may live, enter, and take possession of the land the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. Are statutes and ordinances the same thing? Because it says statutes and ordinances. So, before we answer that question, I got 4 different translations here. One's ours, the CSB, Christian Standard Bible, says statutes and ordinances. The Expanded Bible says laws, statutes, ordinances, requirements, and commands. King James Version says statutes and unto the judgments. And the New American Standard Bible says statutes and the judgment. So back to the same question, is there a difference in statutes and ordinances? So why did they put both of them? So I went to Cambridge Dictionary. Cambridge Dictionary statute says a law that had been formally approved and written down. Ordinance, a law or rule made by a government or authority. So they're a little bit different. Let's do the Hebrew. The Hebrew statute, the word for it means an enactment, hence an appointment of time, space, quantity, labor, or usage. Ordinance, the word used there, is properly a verdict, favorable and unfavorable, pronounced and judicially. So you're looking at the one that shows the most difference between the two of them is the Hebrew translation, which shows one as enactments or appointments or laws, if you will, and the other one is properly a verdict. In other words, well, you can look at it different ways. So, the English translation, I'm going to expand that out a little bit more. The Hebrew meaning has statutes, laws. The Hebrew is an enactment. Ordinances, commands, is judgments. The Hebrew is a verdict. And I put that into our Deuteronomy 4:1. Now Israel, listen to the statutes, laws, enactments, and ordinance, commands, judgments, a verdict. And the ones that I have in italics are the Hebrew words, what the meaning of the Hebrew word is. So, is there a difference between them? The terms statutes and ordinance are frequently encountered in the Bible, particularly in the context of God's laws and commandments. Come in the house. The terms statutes and ordinance are frequently encountered in the Bible, particularly in the context of God's laws and commandments given to the people of Israel. These terms are often used interchangeably, but can carry distinct meanings depending on the context. But statute. A statute generally refers to a specific decree or law that is established by God. It is often seen as a permanent rule that is to be observed by the people. Statutes are typically associated with the ceremonial and the moral laws given to Israel. So we're talking about the statutes. This is what it means. And the ordinance, an ordinance is often understood as a judicial decision or legal judgment. In other words, a verdict, if you will. It can refer to a broader legal framework and so on. So is there a difference between the two words? The two words are very close together, but why is it in the Scripture you had both of them? Is he trying to make a point? What then is the purpose in statutes and ordinances, or ordinances and statutes? In general, what is the purpose of the law for us today? So the question is, what's the purpose in the law for us today? To what? To protect us. A lot of times we'll see the law as something to restrict us, but the things it's restricting us from are the things that will hurt us. Simple thing is, if you didn't have a law telling you which side of the road to drive on, you'd have a lot more accidents because people would be driving on whatever side they want to do. So we have laws to keep us safe and protect us. So all these laws that we're going to be talking about, we're not given to, well, they're given for another reason, which we'll get to in a minute, but they're really to keep the people safe, to protect them. And so the question there, do we need a law? Or do we need the law? Yes. And we need God's law. We need to know what God's law says. We don't need to just have a creator, a God that we worship that doesn't tell us what the law is, and we wind up doing things that we shouldn't be doing, and it gets us in trouble. So, back to Deuteronomy 4:1. Now, Israel, listen to the statutes and ordinances I am teaching you to follow, so that you may live, enter, and take possession of the land the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. Leviticus 18:5 says, keep my statutes and ordinances. A person will live if he does them. I am the Lord. So you can see back in Deuteronomy there it says, so that you may live. In Leviticus it says, a person will live if he does them. In other words, if you follow these laws, you will live. If you follow the ordinances I'm giving you, you will live and you will prosper. Things will be good for you if you'll follow these. So what's the other side of that coin? Yeah, you won't if you don't. Laws are not made to restrict us, but to protect us. Deuteronomy 4:2. You must not add anything to what I command you or take anything away from it, so that you may keep the commands of the Lord your God I am giving you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did in Baal Peor, for the Lord your God destroyed every one of you who followed Baal of Peor. What happened at Baal Peor? Does anybody know? If you do, that's fine. If you don't, I'm going to read it to you. That's in Numbers 25, verse 1. While Israel, what's one of the things he told them not to do? What else he told them not to do? He told them not to intermingle with the people around there because they would lead them in the wrong direction. While Israel was staying in the acacia grove, the people began to prostitute themselves with the women of Moab. The women invited them to the sacrifices for their gods, and the people ate and bowed in worship to their gods. So Israel aligned itself with Baal of Peor. And the Lord's anger burned against Israel. The Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord. Sounds a little harsh, doesn't it? So that his burning anger may turn away from Israel. So Moses told Israel's judges, kill each of the men who aligned themselves with Baal Peor. Then the plague on the Israelites was stopped, but those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. Okay, about how many Jews was there at this time? It's somewhere around 2 million probably. So 24,000 sounds big until you compare it to 2 million. Doesn't sound as big. Why was it good for the people that they killed them? So they couldn't corrupt. If they had been allowed to let that corruption grow throughout the children of Israel, they never would have settled the promised land. They never would have grown into a nation. They never would have done any of the things that they accomplished and that God had them there for. The covenant would have been broken because it would have grown like a disease among them. That was males is all it said. So we're going to, yes, ladies, you can blame the men for this one. Yes. And they were the ones that were... It said they prostituted themselves among the women. And so when they started joining themselves to the women, then the women said, hey, come, I'm going to worship one of my gods. Do you want to come with me? And they said, well, sure. Why not? It didn't work out well. Exodus 20, verse 1 says, then the Lord spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have any other gods besides me. Why is that important? We're going to be getting into the 5th chapter. We'll be back in the 10 Commandments again. It's in the 20th chapter of the book of Exodus. But what's the very first commandment? Do not have any other God before. The Jews see this as statements more than commandments, and they have their first one is, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. That's their number one. And their number two is, do not have any other gods beside me. Why should they not have any other gods beside him? Why is that so important? Why is it so important to not have any other gods besides him? Divided loyalty. What else? Let me ask you like this. How many gods are there? There's only one. So if you're serving another god besides the God of Israel, who are you serving? You're serving somebody that doesn't exist or a demonic spirit or something, but you're not worshiping a God because there's not any God except for one. There's only one God. And so the very first commandment, do not have any other gods besides me. What would have happened to the children of Israel if they had been allowed to follow this? Not follow the statutes and ordinances? There'd be no Israel. It wouldn't be there. And why did God have the men killed that were with the Moabite women? Because if you don't kill that, then it'll grow throughout all the kingdom, and the whole nation will die and cease to exist. Deuteronomy 4:2, you must not add anything to what I command you or take anything away from it, so that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God I am giving you. What did he tell them there? He didn't just say, follow my ordinances. He said, don't add anything to them and don't take anything away. What happens when you add to a law or take away from a law? It keeps diluting it until it no longer says, and no longer has the purpose that it was put there for. That happens a lot of times in our laws in our nation. They'll pass a law with a particular intention and then pass another law that dilutes that law, and then another one that dilutes that law, and before long the original law doesn't even exist anymore. Until it's polluted. Yep, dilutes it until it's polluted. This quote I have here, Torah law does not want people to suffer on behalf of God, but to enjoy life on behalf of God. Absolutely. Aren't human beings inclined to do that anyway? Absolutely. We will say, we have this command, have this thing we know we should do. You say, but how about in this circumstance? Or how about in this case? Maybe we should, really we could add this much to it. It wouldn't change it that much. If you change it all, you have diluted what it says. What happens to the law if you add or take away from it? What we were just talking about. 4th verse. But you who have remained faithful to the Lord your God are all alive today. Look, I have taught you statutes and ordinances as the Lord my God has commanded me, so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to possess. Carefully follow them, for this will show your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the peoples. When they hear about all these statutes, they will say, this great nation is indeed a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call on him? And what great nation has righteous statutes and ordinances like this entire law set before us? Carefully follow them, in the 6th verse, for this will show your wisdom and understanding. In other words, if you're smart, you'll pay attention to these laws. If you want to be wise, if you want to be understanding, then you'll follow these laws, because God's ways are higher than our ways, and what he does is higher than what we do. He understands things much better than we do. This one verse, got 4 translations again. But you who have remained faithful to the Lord your God are all alive today. In the NIV it says, for all of you who held fast to the Lord. King James says, but ye that did cleave unto, and it expanded, it says, but all of you who continued following clung to. This Hebrew word that he uses here is the same word. It means cleave, joining, sticking close. It's the exact same word that's used in Genesis 2nd chapter. It says, but this why a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. In other words, the cleaving to that he's talking about it, you shall become one with God. You shall be joined to God. That's a difference than just saying, I'm going to follow your rules. That's like when I married Diana, I became one flesh with her. It's not a matter of me deciding, well, I don't feel married today. It doesn't matter. I'm one flesh with her. And that's the way it is when we're talking about what they're talking about here. He's talking about cleave to. You cleave to God just like you would, just like the word that we used here. Verse 6. Carefully follow them, for this will show your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the peoples. When they hear about all these statutes, they will say, this great nation is indeed a wise and understanding people. So when you do the things that God has commanded you to do and has instructed you to do, and you follow His ordinances and His statutes, it proves how smart you are. Nowadays, and it's been for a long time, the atheists think we're stupid for following an old book. It was written thousands of years ago. And these rules in this old book. But what's the truth? It saves us a lot of grief and a lot of trouble if we follow those rules in that old book. Jewish commentary. The purpose in the Jewish people is to observe God's commandments, appear wise and discerning to the peoples of the world. The second part of that is, Jews are not obligated to bring the world to Judaism, but to bring God and the 10 Commandments, ethical monotheism. So you're bringing the religion to You're not bringing your religion to them. You're not creating a religion for the people. That's not what the Jewish people were put here for. Nowhere in there it tells them to proselyte other people and bring people into their kingdom and to make them Jews, which you could proselyte people and have people to become Jews. You could do that. But what the Jewish people in general say is that's not what we're called for. This is our purpose here. We're obligated to bring the world not to Judaism, but to bring the 10 Commandments and bring ethical monotheism. How many monotheistic religions are there in the world? 3. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So, it says, carefully follow them, for this will show your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the people. Now look at these statistics here. The Jews make up 0.2% of the world population, yet have received 22% of all Nobel Prizes. A Jewish person is 110 times more likely to win a Nobel than anyone else. Christian population is 32% of the world. We've got Christians have won 65.4% of the Nobel Prizes. Muslims are 25% of the population of the world, and they have 0.46%. 3 monotheistic religions. The highest percentage of any of them are the Jews. There's per capita for the amount of people that's there. Christian population has won more Nobel Prizes, but the Jewish population, percentage-wise, has earned a whole lot more than what we have. So They're following their laws, these ordinances and these statutes has been good for them and has shown them to be wise and have been intelligent and has blessed them. You take the little country of Israel now. It has an inordinate amount of power for the size of nation that it is and the population that it has in that area and in the world. There's more scientific findings, medical findings, and that comes out of Israel than any other nation other than the United States. And percentage-wise, it's a lot more. We send, we'll come up with a finding here. We'll send it. We'll share it with Israel. They'll take it a notch further and share it back with us. So we work together in helping each other, and most Nobel Prizes have been won by the Jews and by the Christians, by far. So God's law has value that we can see, God's ordinances.
The Jews' percentage per capita are more generous than any other religious group in the world.
Yes.
They do more philanthropy. I got it.
Philanthropic enterprises. Well, it's like I said, Sunday when in the Revolutionary War, when Washington needed to move his troops from New York to Virginia to Yorktown, they didn't have any money, and the Congress didn't have any money, and I should have looked the man's name up. This Jewish man, he looked him up, and he raised the money and for them to travel on, and he himself died poor. But he financed a good bit of the Revolutionary War. That was a Jewish man. Oh, skip down. Verse 7. For what great nation is there that has a God near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call to him? Well, let me read the rest of this. What great nation has righteous statutes and ordinances like this entire law I set before you today? Think about this. These people have traveled from Egypt all the way through the wilderness, and when they got hungry, what happened? Food fell down out of the sky, and they picked up food. When they needed water came out of a rock. And so they were provided for by this. So they had seen these things happen, and then with all that, they still wound up fallen away many times. What if they hadn't seen these things? There wouldn't have been a chance. Correlation of the nearness of God and the statutes and ordinances. There is a correlation between them, the statutes and ordinances, and the God that has proclaimed these and put these into motion. The closer we are to God, in fact, I think I put this, okay. Do you feel closer to God when you're reading the Bible than when you're reading a secular novel? There's something different about the Bible than any other book that you can read. It creates emotions and feelings and a closeness. Creates a closeness with God just by reading his statutes and ordinances. Even when you're reading these books that are, for a large part, boring, in the Old Testament, still they have a holiness about them and a oneness with God about them when we're reading them that makes us feel and have a closer relationship with God. It just does, more than any other book. There's no other book like it.
You feel like you're doing what you ought to do.
Right. You feel like you're doing what you ought to do. That helps too. 8th verse, and what great nation has righteous statutes and ordinances like the entire law I set before you today? What other nation has these? In other words, he said there's nobody else around here who has statutes and ordinances like I am giving you. Nobody has those. We're the only nation that does, because we have the only God that there is. 9th verse. Only be on your guard and diligently watch yourselves so that you don't forget the things your eyes have seen, and so that you don't slip from your mind as long as you live. Teach them to your children and your grandchildren. In other words, these things will slip. We will lose these things if we don't continue to carry them on to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation. It's important that we remember them. Why do we, here as a church, why do we celebrate Christmas every year? I mean, we did it last year and the year before. And we did Easter this year, and we did Easter the year before. But if we didn't, what would start happening? We would forget. The other people would forget. We don't spread the word. It could be said that the most important commandment is don't forget. Don't forget. Why have the Jews survived for more than 3,000 years while spending the majority of the time in exile? Why have they continued to prosper? They've been, over 3,000 years they've been in existence, and only a small fragment of that amount of time had they even been in the land that was given to them. They've been scattered all over the world. And I put it, could it be that they have preserved their national memories? And for instance, the Passover. They've been honoring and practicing the Passover for 3,000 years. Every year. Year after year after year. It's important. It is our responsibility to keep alive the statutes and ordinances, and as Christians, the resurrection. It's important that we do that. We talked about, last night, we talked some about witnessing and sharing our faith with the other people. Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to spread the gospel? Why do we need to have anything to do with the gospel at all, other than just for me and mine and keep myself safe? Go into all the world. Make disciples. It's important to make disciples. We should care. Any questions or comments?